I can see my grandmother's face in that photograph the realtor just sent me. The one where they're standing in front of my shack with their arms crossed, laughing. Laughing. Like it was the punchline to some cosmic joke. That moment, sitting in my car in the Whole Foods parking lot with my phone trembling in my hand, I realized I'd spent 3 years of my life caring for an old woman just to get a house that everyone around me thought was worthless. And worse, I was starting to believe them. Let me back up, because this didn't start with laughter or regret. It started with love, honestly. Pure, desperate love. 3 years ago, I was 34 years old, working as a dental hygienist in a strip mall clinic on Route 9 in New Jersey, making decent money, but feeling like I was treading water. My name is Ashley, by the way, Ashley Monroe. I had a studio apartment in Hackensack, a Honda Civic with a weird grinding noise in the transmission, and a 401k that I was pretending was more impressive than it actually was. My mom kept asking when I was getting married. My sister Jennifer was already divorced with 2 kids, and somehow that made her seem more accomplished than me. How does that even work? Then my dad called on a Tuesday evening, right after I'd finished bleaching someone's teeth, and I was still wearing my mask. "Your grandmother's in the hospital," he said. "No preamble, no small talk. That's how my family operates. Stroke. She's in Morris County Medical Center. Your mom's there now, but she's asking for you." My grandmother, Rosemary, was 83 years old and stubborn as a rusted bolt. She lived in this ramshackle house in a place called Denville, New Jersey, about 20 minutes from my apartment. The house was, well, let's call it lived in. Built in 1952, never really renovated. Wooden siding that hadn't seen paint since probably 1987. A roof that sagged in the middle. Windows that rattled when the wind picked up. The kind of house that made HOA presidents weep. But it was hers. She'd owned it outright since 1978. No mortgage, no debt. Just this old, creaky, improbable house sitting on 3/4 of an acre in a neighborhood where every other property had been flipped into a mini-mansion. I drove to the hospital that night. She was in intensive care, half her face slack, her right arm not responding to commands. The doctors said it was a moderate stroke. With physical therapy, she might recover most of her motor function. With time and luck, she might even live independently again. With time and luck. My parents were already having the conversation I could see coming from a mile away. My father works in insurance adjustments. My mother is a nurse. They understand liability and risk in a way that makes them cautious. Grandma Rosemary didn't have long-term care insurance. The house was valuable. The land alone in this market had to be worth something. But her liquid assets were maybe $20,000. Social Security covered her basics, barely. "Someone's going to need to help her recover," my mom said to me in the hallway outside ICU. She was still in her scrubs. Her eyes had that exhausted look that comes from knowing exactly what's about to be asked of you. Physical therapy, someone at home during the day, someone to make sure she takes her medications, someone to help with everything. I already knew where this was going. "I can't do it," my mom continued. "Your father's traveling for work. Jennifer's got the kids, and Danny's hours are unpredictable." Danny is Jennifer's ex-husband, and calling him unpredictable is generous. "And you're single. You have flexibility." There it is, single. Like it was a character flaw. Like I was just waiting around for someone to give me permission to have a life. "How long?" I asked. 3 months, maybe 6, until she's stable enough to hire home care. I didn't say yes that night, but I didn't say no either. And when you don't say no to your family, you've basically already said yes. The first week, I stayed at Grandma's house while she was still in the hospital, cleaning it out. Really cleaning it. The place smelled like old newspapers and the specific blend of elderly person that I can't quite describe. Not unpleasant, just accumulated. Decades of accumulated life. I found things in every drawer. Photographs, greeting cards from 1993, medical bills from 1998, a stack of lottery tickets from the past 5 years. She'd been playing the same numbers for 20 years. Never won more than $5. I found her birth certificate, her marriage certificate, her divorce papers. That last one surprised me. I didn't know Grandma had been divorced. My family doesn't talk about things like that. The kitchen had a 1970s Harvest Gold refrigerator that still ran. The bathroom had a toilet that ran constantly. The bedroom closet was full of clothes from the 1980s, still on their hangers, plastic dry cleaning bags yellowed with age. I started spending nights there, first just to make sure the house was secure while she recovered. Then because it made sense. Then because she came home after 10 days, moving slowly, her right leg dragging slightly, and she looked so small in that big empty house. "I don't want to be a burden," she said that first night, sitting at her kitchen table in a cardigan I'd washed 3 times to get the hospital smell out of it. "You're not a burden," I said, and I meant it. At that moment, I genuinely meant it. I rearranged my work schedule, started taking early shifts at the clinic so I could be at Grandma's by 1 in the afternoon. My boss, this guy named Marcus, was surprisingly understanding about it. His own mother had had a stroke 5 years earlier. He knew the deal. The first month was hard but manageable. Grandma was depressed, understandably. The right side of her body wasn't responding the way the physical therapist said it should. She cried in the bathroom. I pretended not to notice. By month 2, something shifted. She started improving. Her leg got stronger. She could walk to the mailbox without holding on to my arm. She started making jokes again. She'd always been funny, my grandmother, in this dry, observational way. One afternoon, she looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror and said, "Well, half of me is still a knockout. That's something." I found myself wanting to stay there, not just to help her, but because it felt purposeful. I'd call Jennifer and she'd be frazzled, kids screaming in the background, and then I'd hang up and go sit with Grandma and we'd play Scrabble, and it felt like I was actually good at something. My parents noticed. My dad called one Sunday and said, "Your mother's concerned you're isolating yourself." "I'm not isolating," I said. "I'm helping Grandma." "I know, but this is supposed to be temporary." There was something in his voice, though, something unsaid, like he was testing whether I understood the limits of what I was supposed to do. 3 months came and went. The physical therapist said Grandma was doing great for her age, better than expected. The doctor said she could probably manage on her own with some modifications to the house. Grab bars in the bathroom, a medical alert system, regular check-ins. "You can go back to your apartment," Grandma said one afternoon. She was sitting in a lawn chair on her porch, watching the neighborhood. "You've done enough, more than enough." But I'd already made the financial calculations. My studio apartment in Hackensack was $1,200 a month. I wasn't paying rent at Grandma's. I was eating her groceries. I was saving money for the first time in my adult life. More than that, though, and this is the part I didn't fully admit to myself until much later, I was afraid to leave. "Let me stay through the summer," I said, "just to make sure you're really stable." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and pity. "Okay," she said finally, "through the summer." Summer turned into fall. The leaves changed. I bought Grandma a new heating pad for her shoulder, and she bought me a coffee maker for the guest room. My room now, really. I painted the hallway. I fixed the kitchen sink. I got the roof inspected and got a quote for repairs that made us both go quiet. That was November, year 1. By then, my parents had stopped asking when I was coming back. Jennifer had stopped inviting me to family dinners on Sundays, and I had stopped thinking of myself as temporarily displaced. I was just here, at Grandma's house, helping her live. It was a good year, honestly, maybe the best year I'd had in a long time. Then, at Thanksgiving, just before year 2 began, Grandma pulled me into the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room, and she said something that changed everything. "I want to sign the house over to you." I thought she was joking at first. "I'm serious," she said, seeing my face. "You've been here for me when I needed you. Your parents won't take it. Jennifer doesn't want it. You're the only one who's ever really cared about this place. About me." "Grandma, no, I don't have many years left, Ashley. Not many good ones anyway. I'd like to know that this house is going to someone who'll take care of it, who'll actually live in it and love it, not flip it for money." I should have said no. I should have said a lot of things. Instead, I called a family law attorney, found one through my dental clinic's insurance plan, and we started the paperwork. My parents found out about 2 weeks later. My father actually came to the house to talk to me about it, which was unusual enough to make me nervous. "She's not in her right mind," he said, standing in the kitchen with his coat still on. "Post-stroke, there could be neurological changes affecting her judgment. A lawyer could challenge it." "She's fine," I said. "Her doctor cleared her. She's sharp as ever." "She's old and lonely and grateful that you're here," he said. "That's not the same as making sound financial decisions." But he didn't stop it, and my mother, when I called to explain, just said, "Well, it's her house to do with as she pleases," which was the most passive-aggressive thing I'd ever heard her say. The deed was transferred in February. Notarized, filed, official. I was now the legal owner of a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath house built in 1952 that needed a roof, new siding, updated electrical wiring, and probably foundation work. I was also still working at the dental clinic, still making good money, but not enough to actually do anything about the house's problems. Not yet. "This is your inheritance," Grandma said when we signed the final papers. She squeezed my hand. "You earned it." I remember smiling. I remember feeling proud, actually, like I'd finally done something that mattered. I didn't know that in 6 months, I'd start to understand why my father had looked so concerned. I didn't know that my parents were already talking to a realtor, and I definitely didn't know that someone very close to me, had already started making plans for what to do with that old house once Grandma was gone. But sitting in my car that day, staring at that photograph of people laughing in front of my house, I found out all of it at once. The photograph was sent to my father's email, and he forwarded it to me without comment. Just the image attached, no message. No, "we need to talk," or "I'm sorry," or anything that would have given me a moment to prepare. I sat in my car in the Whole Foods parking lot for maybe 5 minutes before I could actually look at it. My hands were shaking, not metaphorically, actually trembling against the steering wheel like I was cold, except it was 72 degrees and sunny outside. When I finally opened the email, I saw them. 3 people standing in front of my house, Grandma's house, the one that was legally mine now, with their arms crossed and these wide, satisfied smiles. My father on the left, a woman I recognized as Jennifer's friend Karen on the right, and between them, holding a printed sheet that looked like a property listing, was my mother. They were laughing. You could see it in their posture, in the way their shoulders curved inward with amusement. They looked like they'd just won something. My phone rang before I could process what I was seeing. My father. "We need to talk about the house," he said. No greeting, no preamble. "Your mother and I have been consulting with a realtor. The property, as you know, is in significant disrepair. The land value alone is substantial, probably around $450,000 in this market. With the house demolished and a new construction, we're looking at a potential sale price of $700,000, maybe more." I couldn't speak. "We've been very patient, Ashley," he continued, and his voice had that tone, that disappointed tone I'd heard my entire life when I didn't meet expectations. "But you can't live there forever. It's not practical. You need to think about your future, your career, starting a family. You can't do any of that while you're playing caretaker." "I'm not playing anything," I said. My voice sounded strange to me. "That's my house. It's also your grandmother's legal residence, and she's still alive. When she passes, and she will pass, probably sooner rather than later, we need to make sure her assets are handled appropriately." "Are you hearing yourself right now? You're talking about her dying like you're planning a lunch schedule." "I'm being practical. Your mother and I have already consulted with an estate attorney. There are some complications with how the property was transferred to you. Questions about whether she had full cognitive capacity at the time of the deed. If we needed to challenge it, don't," I said. "Don't you dare." "Ashley, be reasonable. Your mother has spent 2 years trying to convince you to move on with your life. You've isolated yourself. You're not dating. You've essentially put your career on hold. For what? To renovate a house you can't afford to renovate?" I hung up on him. I should have called someone. My therapist, maybe, except I didn't have a therapist. Jennifer, maybe, except she was part of this, I was sure of it. The realtor, Karen, had to have come from somewhere, and Jennifer was always the one making connections, pulling strings, strategizing. Instead, I sat in the parking lot for another hour and stared at that photograph. The thing that destroyed me most wasn't the betrayal, exactly. It was that they looked so happy, so certain, like they were already spending the money, already planning the new construction, already moving past me and Grandma like we were obstacles they'd successfully navigated around. I drove to the house on autopilot. Grandma was in the living room watching Jeopardy, her legs up on the ottoman. She'd been doing better lately. Physical therapy had gone well. The doctor had said she could probably manage alone if she needed to, though she'd always need monitoring. She took one look at my face and muted the television. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. The photograph, the email, the phone call, the estate attorney, the demolition plans. The whole thing spilled out of me in this ugly, furious stream. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat quietly for a long time. "I told your father this would happen," she said finally. "Years ago, when I first bought this place, I said, 'That house is going to be worth something someday, and your wife is going to want it.' He laughed at me then, but he remembered. Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have—" "You should have what? Not helped me? Not stayed?" She shook her head. "Don't apologize for being a good person, Ashley. That's not your failing." "But now they're saying they might challenge the deed. They're saying you weren't in your right mind when you signed it." "Were they there when I signed it? Were they at the lawyer's office?" "No." "Then they have no evidence. And I'll testify that I was completely lucid. I had a stroke, not dementia. I know the difference between my own mind and someone else's." I wanted to believe her. But I also knew my parents. I knew how they operated. Methodical, patient, willing to spend money on things like legal consultations. They'd already started building a case before they even told me about it. "I need to talk to someone," I said. "A lawyer. Someone who understands real estate and family disputes." Grandma reached over and squeezed my hand. "There's someone you should call. Someone I should have mentioned a long time ago. My old neighbor, Linda. She's retired now, but she was a paralegal for 40 years. Sharp as a tack. She lives 3 houses down, the blue one with the white shutters." I'd seen that house 1,000 times. I'd never really thought about who lived there. "She won't charge you," Grandma continued, "but she'll tell you the truth. About your parents, about the deed, about what they can and can't do, and more importantly, she'll tell you what you can do." I found Linda at home an hour later. She answered the door in gardening gloves, mid-potting soil on her hands, and when I explained what I needed, she just nodded like she'd been expecting me. "Come in," she said. "I'll make coffee, and get me some documents. You're going to need to tell me everything." Over the next 3 hours, sitting at Linda's kitchen table with legal pads and Linda's ancient but comprehensive reference materials, I learned things that made my chest feel tight. The first thing was that my parents' threat had teeth, but not as much as they probably thought. A competency challenge would require evidence, medical records, testimony, something concrete. The stroke had happened 2.5 years ago, and Grandma had recovered well enough that any competency evaluation would be difficult to argue. "But they'll try," Linda said, tapping her pen against the table. "And trying costs money. Lawyer fees, maybe expert witnesses, time in court. They're betting you don't have the resources to fight them." "I don't," I admitted. "I've got maybe $15,000 in savings." "Then we do this smart," Linda said. "First, we get your grandmother evaluated by a neuropsychologist, voluntarily, proactively. A clean bill of health from a qualified expert makes their challenge look like harassment." "How much does that cost?" 3, maybe 4,000, but it's worth it." "I don't have 4,000. "I'll lend it to you," Linda said simply. "Consider it an investment in not letting your parents steamroll you." I stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've been living next to your grandmother for 18 years, and she's the best neighbor I've ever had. And because I'm 71 years old, and I don't have much use for money anymore, but I have a lot of use for standing up for what's right." She smiled. "Also, because I was married to a man like your father once, and I recognize the type. Control-oriented, financially manipulative, absolutely certain they know what's best for everyone else." I didn't stand up to him, and I spent 30 years regretting it. I'm not going to watch that happen to you." I cried then. I didn't mean to, but it happened. This ugly, shocked crying because someone I didn't even know was offering to help me, and it suddenly made real how alone I'd felt. "There's more," Linda said, handing me tissues. "Your parents sent that photograph to your father's email with a realtor's contact information, which means they're already in talks about listing the property, which is illegal, actually, since you own it and they don't. But it does tell us something important." "What?" "They're moving fast. They think you'll crack. They think you'll get scared and sell to them, or let them convince you to sell so they can split the proceeds. They're not expecting you to fight." "Can I stop them from selling? I own the house." "Absolutely. You can also file for a cease and desist letter against the realtor. You can tell your parents that any further discussions about the property without your explicit consent constitute harassment. And," Linda paused, pulling out another sheet of paper, "you can do something else entirely." She slid the paper across the table. It was a printout of a property tax assessment form. "Your house needs serious work," Linda said. "Roof, siding, foundation, electrical. Probably $30,000–40,000 minimum before it's in decent condition. Money you don't have. But there's another option. You refinance." "I can't refinance something I don't have a mortgage on." "You can take out a home equity line of credit. Banks love lending against land value in this area. You'd probably qualify for at least $150,000, maybe $200. You fix up the house, live there, establish it as your primary residence and investment. And suddenly, it's not in disrepair anymore. It's not a teardown. It's an asset you're actively developing." "But then I'd be in debt." "Yes, but you'd also own something they can't touch, and you'd have demonstrated that you're serious about keeping it." I looked at her. "You've thought about this a lot." "I have," she admitted, "because I knew this was coming. Your parents have been circling for months. The realtor was asking me questions about the property value, the neighborhood, whether the house was historically significant. They were doing their homework. I just didn't think they'd move this fast." My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Dad told me what's happening. Mom and Dad just want what's best for you. Please call us so we can talk about this like adults." I didn't respond. "What do you want to do?" Linda asked. I thought about the house, about Grandma sitting on the porch, about the kitchen where we played Scrabble, about the bedroom I'd painted, and the hallway I'd fixed. I thought about my parents standing in front of it with their satisfied smiles, already spending money that wasn't theirs. "I want to fight," I said. "Good," Linda said. "Then we start tomorrow. First, we get your grandmother that evaluation. Then we get you that HELOC. And then we have a very serious conversation with your parents about what happens if they don't back off." "And if they don't?" Linda smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Then we make sure everyone knows exactly what they tried to do." I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Something like possibility. Something like I might not be as powerless as I'd started to believe. Grandma was waiting up for me, still in her chair, Jeopardy long finished. "Well?" she asked. "We're going to fight," I said, "if that's okay with you." "It's more than okay," she said. "Ashley, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Something about why I really wanted you to have this house." She took a breath, and I sat down beside her because I could tell this was important. "Before your father was born," she started, "I was married to someone else, a man named Robert. He wasn't kind to me, not physically, not usually, but in every other way. He controlled the money. He made the decisions. He told me who I could see, where I could go. I let him because I was young and scared, and I didn't know any better. I'd never heard any of this. When I finally left him, I had nothing. No money, no education, no support system. Your grandfather, your father's father, he helped me. He gave me a job, helped me get back on my feet, and eventually I saved enough to buy this house. And that house saved my life, Ashley. It was the first thing that was mine, that I'd earned, that no one could take away from me." She paused, her eyes wet. "I wanted you to have that. Not just a house, that feeling, that security, that knowledge that you have something that's yours, that you built, that no one else gets to decide what happens to. Grandma. Your parents love you, but they love control more. They've always been like that. And I didn't want you to spend your whole life wondering if you'd made the right choices, or if you'd done enough, or if you deserved to keep the things you'd earned. I wanted you to know, absolutely, that you did. I held her hand and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to say that would be big enough. But I knew what came next. I knew that my parents weren't going to back down just because Linda had given me a roadmap. I knew that the fight was just beginning, and I knew that before it was over, something was going to break, either their case against me or my relationship with my family, possibly both. The next morning, I called the neuropsychologist Linda had recommended, and I called a mortgage broker, and I called the realtor my parents had hired and told her that the property was not for sale, that any further contact would be considered harassment, and that I would be filing a cease and desist if she didn't stop immediately. My mother called me 30 minutes later. "Your father is very disappointed in you," she said. No hello, no preamble. "Good," I said, and I meant it. "We're trying to help you." "No, you're not. You're trying to help yourselves, and I'm done letting you pretend otherwise." There was a long silence on the other end. "You're going to regret this," my mother said finally. "Maybe," I said, "but at least it'll be my regret, not something you forced on me." I hung up before she could respond. Linda was right. They were moving fast, which meant I had to move faster, and I was just getting started. The neuropsychologist's office was in a medical building off Route 23, and the waiting room smelled like that specific blend of air freshener and anxiety that all mental health clinics seem to have. Grandma sat beside me in a beige chair, her purse in her lap, her posture perfect. She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. "I'm fine. You know I'm fine." "I know," I said, "but we need to prove it to everyone else." The evaluation took 4 hours. I waited in the lobby while Dr. Patricia Chen, a neuropsychologist with credentials that Linda had vetted extensively, ran Grandma through a series of cognitive tests, memory exercises, problem-solving tasks, questions about her childhood, her family, her understanding of current events, detailed assessments of her ability to manage finances, make medical decisions, understand the legal implications of property transfer. When Grandma came out, she looked exhausted but satisfied. "She asked me everything except my shoe size," she said. "I passed, though, whatever that means." It meant something. It meant that 2 weeks later, when we got the report back, it was rock solid. Dr. Chen's conclusion was clear. Rosemary Monroe was cognitively intact, with no signs of dementia, confusion, or decision-making impairment. The stroke had affected her motor function, not her mind. Her understanding of the property transfer had been clear, intentional, and legally sound. I sent a copy to my father's lawyer before I told my parents I had it. His response came via email, copied to my mother. It was short. "We'll review the evaluation with our counsel and get back to you." But the tone had changed. The certainty was gone. Linda and I met at her kitchen table the next afternoon. She'd already reviewed the HELOC paperwork I'd started gathering. "You qualify," she said, sliding the pre-approval letter across to me. $175,000 at 4.8%. Your monthly payment would be around $1,200, maybe $1,300 with taxes and insurance. "I can do that," I said. My salary at the dental clinic was $48,000 a year. Before taxes and expenses, I had about $3,000 a month in disposable income. Tight, but doable, especially if I could pick up extra shifts. "The question is whether you want to do it," Linda said. "Because once you take this money, you're committing to this house. You're not just living there anymore. You're investing in it. You're saying this is your life." I thought about that. I thought about my studio apartment in Hackensack, about the dental hygiene career I'd put on hold, about the boyfriend I'd never gotten around to meeting because I was always at Grandma's. I thought about the life I was supposed to be having versus the life I was actually living. "I want to do it," I said finally. "I want to fix the house. I want to make it something worth keeping. I want my parents to look at it and realize they can't just take it from me because it's inconvenient." Linda smiled. "Then let's give them a reason to reconsider their position." The house inspection I'd ordered came back with a detailed assessment of everything that needed fixing. The roof was worse than I'd thought, not just old, but structurally compromised in 2 places. The electrical system was original to 1952, which meant it was essentially a fire hazard. The plumbing was corroded. The foundation had some settling, though nothing catastrophic yet. Total estimated repairs, $37,000. I approved the HELOC. The money hit my account a week later. I hired the roofers first. They came on a Monday morning with a truck full of equipment, and within 3 hours, they'd started tearing off the old shingles. The sound was incredible, this loud, rhythmic scraping that seemed to shake the whole neighborhood. I stood in the yard and watched them work, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been frozen since my parents sent that photograph. My mother called while the roofers were still there. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tight. "Fixing the roof," I said. I could hear the roofers in the background, could imagine her hearing it too, could imagine her understanding exactly what it meant. "With what money?" "Mine," I said. "HELOC against the property, which is my property, which I own." There was a long silence. "Your father wants to know if you'd be willing to meet with a mediator," she said finally, "to discuss the situation." A mediator. That was new. That was them realizing they might not win. "No," I said. "Tell him that if he and his lawyer contact me again, I'm filing a harassment complaint. Tell him that I have documentation of his attempts to interfere with my legal property ownership. Tell him that Linda Morrison, who is a retired paralegal with 40 years of experience, is prepared to testify about his misconduct if this goes to court. And tell him that I'm not interested in discussing anything unless he's ready to apologize." "Ashley, you're being unreasonable." "I'm being clear," I said. "There's a difference." I hung up before she could respond. The roofers finished on Wednesday. By Friday, the electrician had started the rewiring job. 2 weeks later, the plumber came and replaced all the corroded pipes. The house was transforming. Not dramatically, it was still old, still quirky, still the same house it had been, but it was becoming stable, becoming safe, becoming something you'd actually want to live in. I documented everything, took pictures of each stage of the work, got receipts from every contractor, built a paper trail that made it absolutely clear I was maintaining and improving the property, not neglecting it. My father's lawyer sent a letter 3 weeks into the repairs. It stated that they were withdrawing their competency challenge. No explanation, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a formal statement that the matter was closed. I showed Linda the letter. "They realized they'd lose," she said simply, "and they realized that if they pursued it, you'd have grounds for a countersuit for harassment and interference with property ownership. Do you think they'll try something else? Maybe. But you've made it expensive and complicated for them. They'll have to decide if it's worth it." They decided it wasn't. My father called me, actually called, not emailed, not had his lawyer call, on a Friday afternoon in June. I was in the backyard, directing the landscaper who was helping me restore the garden that Grandma had let go wild over the past few years. "We need to talk," he said. "Okay," I said. "I'm listening." "In person. Can you come to the house? Your mother and I, we want to see you." I almost said no. Some part of me wanted to maintain the separation, the clarity of the boundary I'd drawn. But another part, a smaller, more tired part, wanted to understand. Wanted to know how we'd gotten here, wanted to know if there was any way back. "Tomorrow," I said, 1 o'clock. They lived in a different house now, a bigger one in a neighborhood with a strict HOA. Everything was immaculate. Everything was exactly what successful suburban life was supposed to look like. My mother answered the door. She looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing her differently now. My father was in the living room, sitting in a leather chair with his hands folded on his lap. "Thank you for coming," he said. I didn't sit down. "We made a mistake," my mother said. She was standing in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen, her body language suggesting she might bolt at any moment. "With the realtor, with how we approached the situation. You made more than a mistake, I said. You betrayed me. You tried to manipulate me. You attempted to legally challenge my ownership of a property that was legally transferred to me. You did all of that without ever asking me what I wanted. We wanted what was best for you, my father said. No, you wanted what was best for you. You wanted that land value. You wanted the house demolished and redeveloped. You wanted to profit from your mother's death and my 3 years of care. I paused. And you wanted to do it without me having a say. My father flinched, actually flinched, like I'd physically hit him. That's not fair, my mother said. It's exactly fair, I said. Linda Morrison, by the way, is a neighbor. She was married to someone like you, Dad. She spent 30 years in a marriage where she didn't stand up for herself. She watched you and Mom, and she recognized the pattern. She told me that. She told me that she couldn't let it happen to me. I watched the information settle on my father's face, watched him understand that not only had I figured out what he was doing, but that someone in the neighborhood knew. That it wasn't private, that it was exposed. I don't want your apology, I continued. I don't want your explanation. What I want is for you to understand that you no longer get to make decisions about my life. You don't get to decide what's best for me. You don't get to interfere with my property. You don't get to talk to realtors or lawyers about my house. You don't get access to information about my finances or my plans. From this point forward, you are the people I came from, but you are not the people I'm accountable to. My mother made a small sound, something between a sob and a gasp. That's not what families do, my father said. No, I agreed. Families don't do what you did either, so we're just going to have to figure out what we are. I turned and walked out, didn't wait for a response, didn't give them a chance to negotiate or convince or manipulate, just walked out the door, got in my car, and drove home. Grandma was on the porch when I arrived, and she took one look at my face and knew. You did it, she said. I did, I said. I sat down beside her in the wicker chairs we'd bought together last month. I don't know what happens now. With them, with our family. What do you want to happen? Grandma asked. I don't know, I admitted. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I don't think I can just forgive them and move on like nothing happened. Then don't, Grandma said. You don't have to. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to keep that boundary. Your job isn't to make them feel better about what they did. We sat in silence for a while, watching the neighborhood. The house next door was in mid-renovation. Across the street, someone was watering their lawn. Normal, suburban, unremarkable life happening all around us. I'm proud of you, Grandma said finally. I need you to know that. Not for winning against your parents, for choosing yourself, for deciding that you deserved better than what they were offering. I learned from the best, I said. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that made her whole face light up. 6 months later, the house was completely renovated. The roof was solid. The electrical system was up to code. The plumbing was reliable. I'd painted the exterior a soft gray blue that made it look both classic and carefully maintained. The landscaping was coming back. The kitchen had new countertops. The bathroom had been updated without losing its character. I'd spent $62,000 total, which meant I still had room in the HELOC if I needed it for future repairs or improvements. The house had gone from looking like a teardown to looking like a carefully preserved home. Not flashy, not trendy, but solid, real, valuable. A property appraiser came through at my request. The new assessment came back at $620,000, up from the $450,000 that my parents had been estimating. I wasn't selling. I didn't care about the number except that it proved a point. I hadn't made a mistake. I hadn't wasted my time or my money. I'd invested in something real, and it had paid off in ways that went far beyond the dollar amount. My sister Jennifer called me for the first time in months. I heard you fixed up the house, she said. No apology, no acknowledgement of her role in what had happened. I did, I said. It looks great. Mom and Dad want to come see it. No, I said. They don't. Ashley, I'm not doing this with you, Jennifer. You chose a side. You participated in something ugly. And now you're calling me, like we're friends again, and like we can just move forward. We can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So that's it? You're cutting us out? I'm setting a boundary. You can be in my life if you respect that boundary, but you don't get to pretend the last year didn't happen. I hung up. It was harsh, but it was also true. 2 years passed. Grandma's health remained stable. We fell into a rhythm, me working, her managing the house stuff she could handle, both of us sharing the space in a way that felt natural and right. She'd started painting again, a hobby from decades ago that she'd abandoned when life got busy. The guest room became her studio. My parents sent a Christmas card one year. Just a card, no letter, no personal note. I didn't respond. Jennifer sent a text on my birthday. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. I didn't respond to that either. I wasn't interested in rebuilding those relationships on their terms. And I wasn't interested in relationships at all if they came with the expectation that I'd let myself be manipulated again. I did meet someone, actually, a guy named Marcus, different Marcus, not my boss, who came to fix the fence in the backyard. He was a contractor, and he was quiet, and he didn't try to tell me what I should be doing with my life. We got coffee, then dinner. Then he started staying over on weekends. It was slow and easy and completely uncomplicated by family drama. On one of those weekends, Grandma pulled me aside and said, "He seems nice." "He is," I said. "Are you happy?" "Yeah," I said. And I was. Not in some explosive, everything is perfect way, but in a steady, reliable way. I had a house that was mine. I had a life that I'd built myself. I had someone in my life who treated me well. I had my grandmother, who I loved. I had respect for myself. "Good," Grandma said. "That's all I ever wanted for you." On a Tuesday in November, 3 years and 2 months after the photograph in the Whole Foods parking lot, my mother showed up at the house. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe just older. Tired in a way that went deeper than just physical exhaustion. "Can we talk?" she asked. I almost said no. But something in her face, something that looked like genuine regret rather than manipulation, made me pause. "Come inside," I said. We sat at the kitchen table where Grandma and I had played Scrabble 1,000 times. My mother looked around at the renovations, at the improvements, at the evidence of the care I'd taken with the space. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one. Not because I'm sorry we got caught, because I'm sorry for what we did." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "Your father and I," she continued, "we were scared, not about the house, about you, about the fact that you were giving up your life for your grandmother, and we couldn't seem to make you stop. We thought if we could just get you to see that the house wasn't worth it, you'd move on. You'd get back to your life. You'd find someone. You'd have a career. You'd be happy. So you tried to take the house away from me." "Yes, and it was wrong. It was wrong before we even started, and it only got wronger as we went along. When the realtor sent that photograph, I actually felt sick, but I didn't stop it. I just let it happen." She was crying now, the kind of quiet crying where tears just slide down your face without any fanfare. "I've spent the last 2 years wondering what kind of mother raises a daughter who's so afraid of her that she won't even call," my mother said. "And the answer is, me. I did that. I raised you to believe that you had to earn love by doing what I thought was best, that your own judgment didn't matter, that your own choices didn't matter." I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like understanding. "I don't know how to fix this," my mother said. "I don't know if you'll ever trust me again, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry." "I appreciate that," I said finally, "but I'm not ready to pretend everything's fine. I'm not ready to go back to normal." "I know," my mother said. "I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking if maybe, eventually, we could figure out what comes next." I thought about it, thought about the years ahead, and whether I wanted to spend them maintaining a grudge, or whether I wanted to try, carefully, to rebuild something. "Maybe," I said, "but it has to be different. You have to respect my boundaries. You have to accept that I know what's best for me, even if you disagree, and you have to understand that trust has to be earned." My mother nodded. She was still crying, but differently now. Not the crying of someone who's been caught, but the crying of someone who's actually understood something about themselves. "I can do that," she said, "if you'll let me try." We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we sat at that table for another hour, and we talked, really talked, about the house, about Grandma, about why my mother had always been so controlling, about her own mother and the patterns that had been passed down. It wasn't a resolution. It was just the beginning of one. After she left, I went to find Grandma. She was in her studio working on a painting, a landscape, something that looked like it might be this house, surrounded by trees. "Your mother was here," Grandma said without turning around. "Yeah," I said. "How did it go?" "I don't know yet," I said. "Ask me in a year." Grandma smiled. "Fair enough." I stood in the doorway and watched her paint, and I thought about the last 3 years, about the choice to stay, about the choice to fight, about the choice to keep my boundary even when it hurt, about the choice to eventually, maybe, try again. The house creaked around us, settled into the evening, the sounds of an old building that's been cared for and is slowly, patiently becoming something new. I'd come to Grandma's house to help her recover from a stroke. I'd stayed because I loved her. I'd fought because I deserved to. And I'd rebuilt because I believed it was worth rebuilding. The shack that everyone had laughed at was now a home, and more than that, it was mine. Not because my parents had decided I was worthy of it, but because I'd decided I was worthy of fighting for it. And that made all the difference.